Ice Lance has been nerfed. What are we doing? First of all, let's take a look at all the different changes for mages that we have. We have some of the PvE changes here at the top. These are changes that will be made towards all of WoW in every single instance. And then we have the player versus player changes. So for the PvE oriented changes, keep in mind these are still going to affect PvP. So we have Living Bomb increased by 30%, Pyroblast damage increased by 5%, Flame Strike damage increased by 10%, Frostfire Bolt damage increased by 25% for fire only. Burden of Power can no longer be double dipped by spell queuing. Arcane Phoenix damage dealt by 10%, damage reduced by 10%. And then Arcane Soul base duration reduced to 2. Then if we scroll down to the PvP section, we'll see the Frost Mage Ice Lance damage increased by 45% in PvP. You can see it got nerfed by a 30% modifier. It used to be 175% increased damage, now it's 145. I'm not a math expert here, but I don't believe that comes out to be exactly a 30% nerf. In fact, I think it's somewhere between 17 and 18%. So when you think about that in the case of hitting some crazy numbers on Ice Lance, I don't know what I have here on my data, but if we just look, if I'm hitting a maximum of 1.5 million, 17% off that is probably valid. It's probably valid, to be honest, guys, because 1.5 is not like some small number, right? Like that is crazy number for being able to generate Ice Lance procs like crazy. You don't even have to have a proc either. You can literally just send it into a flurry and it has a chance to hit that. When you compare it to Fire Mage, right? Fire Mage is pumping out Pyroblasts like crazy, right? So the number on that one has to be a little bit lower. However, Blizzard has it currently a little bit too low. So with Lance, I do agree that it needed somewhere around a 15 to 20% nerf. So yeah, this is something that I was predicting around this number. This is a completely warranted nerf. I believe the instant cast build will still be extremely solid. This is the part of the video that you guys clicked on. What are we doing? Well, we have two options here in my eyes. The first option is we're just going to keep playing as if we never got nerfed. We're just going to keep playing the Ice Lance build. I think it'll still be solid, still be really good. The other option that you could pick, now that I think Lances won't actually crit for the amount of a Glacial Spike, is you could potentially drop one in Splintering Cold and go into Glacial Spike. You could do that now because I think the biggest spikes I was hitting were, wow, that's a really large spike, 2.2 mil. That was probably on an undergeared player if I had to guess. But I would say on average in the arena setting, I'm hitting around 1.6 at the top end to like 1 mil, just to keep it realistic. Yeah, now that's Lance won't actually hit that peak of that 1.6 mil. I think it could be valid to start playing that if you want. But if you don't like Glacial Spike, then hey, just keep playing the instant cast build. It's going to feel the exact same. It just might be a little weaker, but that's all. Keep in mind that it kind of needs to feel a little weaker, right? We live in a world where casting in WoW can be very difficult if you aren't adept at getting precog, or maybe don't have an understanding of how to trade mobility 1-for-1, so you can actually get away from people so that you can cast. That's something that is very difficult to learn how to do. So like I said, I think this instant cast build kind of spoke to a lot of players, kind of resonated with them. Yeah, if that's you, then like I said, my recommendation is to continue playing that build. However, if you do want to take out a little bit of instant damage for some casted damage, I recommend playing Spike. Now, I have a guide on YouTube that you guys can check out that was sort of it sort of predicted it sort of predicted that this nerf would happen, right? We sort of saw this nerf coming, but in the guide we do have the instant cast build there at the bottom, and then after that we have the Glacial Ray build. Now, if you don't want to play Ray, that's completely fine. That's completely optional. Some people aren't sure what to give up to switch between them, so I'm going to show you guys now. So this is the instant cast build, right? If you want to play Glacial Spike, it's pretty easy. You take out Splintering Cold and you go into Glacial Spike. If you don't want to play Glacial Spike and you just want to play Ray of Frost, you take out 2 in Splintering and you go Ray, because you need Cryopathy to play Ray. Now, if you want to play both, this is where it's like pretty difficult, because you kind of have to give up something good. You have to give up some section here at the bottom, because you can't take something out from up here. So you either need to lose Splitting Ice, which increases Ice Lance damage by 5%, so that's something like I don't really recommend. Ice Lance damage, having more damage on that is insane. Chain Reaction also, same thing. Kind of hard to give up. Freezing Winds, this is nerfed in PvP to make it to where you get a Fingers proc every 5 seconds instead of 3, so you could give that up, or you could give up Glacial Assault, which makes it to where whenever your Comet attacks someone, they take 6% increased damage, or your Flurry has a random chance to call down this Glacial Assault as well. So I like this ability a lot, but I also really like Freezing a lot. And then Freezing Rain is important too, because you need to be able to consistently get your orbs out. Sometimes in like a single target setting, maybe Freezing Rain makes a little bit less sense, but it's still even good just because you can have instant blizzards to kite to slow people. So the only option in my eyes really here is Glacial Assault, even though it does suck. This is like the more casted build with Glacial and Ray. I kind of don't recommend playing this one, to be honest. I think just Glacial is fine if you wanted some more casted damage. I think Ray still does feel a little weak, honestly. Like the ticks are 400 to 500k. It's a little bit hard to judge Ray of Frost, obviously, because you got to think that the damage happens in under a global, so you can't account for one Ray tick equaling one global. Because if you have a haste modifier and you're channeling a Ray, you can see it does damage every 0.8 seconds. But with haste, that would be like every 0.5 or something. So I guess if you want to think about it in terms of like a global's worth of damage and an ice lance being about 1 million, if you're channeling a ray tick that's like 400 to 500k, each ray tick is sort of like an ice lance. Or sorry, for every 2 ray ticks, it's basically like an ice lance. Which, I don't know, to me, whenever Ray was really good, Ray fully channeled into a flurry charge to make sure that it would crit, was doing about 100 O's, like 100 O amount of damage. Now it's not really like that. I think Glacial is fine if you guys want to run that, like I said. I'll probably be doing that myself. I did want to talk a little bit about some of the other changes. So if you guys are interested in the other 2 specs, I want to talk about what I think is going on with these 2 specs. So for Fire Mage, I think we all expected to see a lot more on Pyroblast. I think for one, we expected to see Fire Mage in the PvP tuning at all. We actually only received PvE tuning for it. Pyroblast was only 5%, Living Bomb 30, Flame Strike 10. So I think we learned a lot with Living Bomb in Dragonflight, and it's that you can't really buff this spell by this amount. When Living Bomb hits for, what is it hitting for right now? Like maybe 50,000. Average crit is like 40,000. Average crit is like 30,000, peaking at 90 to 100k. So yeah, that's what I mean. Like when you buff Living Bomb by that amount, it makes it go from like 110k to like 140k, right? It doesn't really do much considering that HP pulls are 6 million. So kind of a pointless change there, I think, in my opinion. Pyroblast increased by 5%. I mean, this is obviously good. We want these kind of changes, but I think 5% was maybe a bit low. However, I was talking to a friend of mine, venruki, and he had a good point that I didn't think of previously, and it's that if pyro damage is too high, it becomes like the Ice Lance version of Mage, right? Because what you're doing the whole game is pumping pyros. Like there isn't a single global that you're like not putting in Pyroblast. Pyroblast damage, if it's too high, Fire Mage would probably become like too much like this version of Frost that we have now, which is like kind of oppressive to fight. If you guys have ever fought a Frost Mage current game, it can be definitely pretty annoying. At the same time, I think you definitely need Pyroblast to be hitting harder than it is right now. I think there needs to be a good number. I'm not sure what that number is on how much you should be increasing Pyro, but I know for a fact that Pyroblast can't be the weakest hitting spell for Fire Mage right now, and it currently is. It's currently like the lowest priority spell. And then we have Flame Strike increased by 10%. Again, really hope they don't, I mean, I think the optimism in me is saying that these are for PvE, so of course they're going to be buffing some of the other like AoE stuff. And then with this change is actually a nice one for fire, like the only one that I'm really content with. Frostfire Bolt damage increased by 25% for fire, so Frostfire Bolt is going to truck on a Fire Mage now, which is good, hopefully. And then these are some Sun Fury changes to Arcane Mage. If we want to look at those real quick, I can explain it more in depth. So we have Burden of Power can no longer be double dipped by spell queuing. If you guys don't know what that means, let me generate a Spellfire Sphere. You can see this is a Burden of Power proc, and what you used to be able to do, let's read it real quick. Arcane Blast, damage increased by 30, and Arcane Barrage, damage increased by 30. If you casted a blast and spammed a barrage as you were casting the blast, the Burden of Power would be able to affect both, because they were both going out at the same instant, right? Like when you hit a blast barrage, both are being pushed out at the same time. So Burden of Power would affect both. They're removing the ability to do that, which to me is like they're removing fun in the name of nerfing the spec, because I think it was fun to be able to do that. I would have rather them just reduced the modifier on it from like 30 to something else, but it's kind of whatever. You know, they did this same kind of change to Nether Precision to where you couldn't double dip on that because that affects barrage now too, but then I believe they went back on it. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen with that ability, but we can only hope that it might be brought back just like the Nether Precision. However, it's actually not like the biggest deal. It was just kind of fun. It was a little bit of a dopamine hit to be able to do that, you know. Arcane Phoenix damage dealt reduced by 10%. This obviously sucks because that Phoenix did a good amount of damage. Seeing a flat DPS increase or decrease on Arcane sucks for sure, like with the Phoenix thing. So if we look at our damage here, so yeah, your Phoenix had potential to occasionally top damage if you proc the right spells. So this is getting nerfed by 10%. So that definitely sucks a little bit, the fact that your Phoenix is going to do less damage. And then Arcane Soul's base duration reduced to 2 was 3. This is just referring to this bottom portion here. Arcane Barrage grants clear casting and generates 4 arcane charges, but it grants Arcane Soul for a baseline of 2 seconds now and an additional 0.5 for each exceptional spell. Now, the reason why I believe this change doesn't matter is because a lot of the times you had the only thing this is going to do is affect your first surge, essentially, because on your first surge of the game, most of the time you're going to go into it with no Phoenixes. So instead of getting it for 3 seconds now to be able to generate 3 clear castings, you might only be able to generate 2. Maybe it could be worth now before your first surge to definitely ramp to at least 1 Phoenix. Actually, I don't even know if an additional 0.5 is going to be worth it. But basically, like, my opinion is before you already sort of had enough time to send 3. And then you had a couple seconds where you didn't really need the remaining portion of Arcane Soul, essentially. Like right here, for example. I'm going to get this proc 1, 2, 3. And it's like I already have 3 clear castings now. So that last one was kind of unneeded in a way. It was just like a little bit of extra damage there. I still would never prioritize that really anyways. So to me, that change doesn't really affect a whole lot. I think it's fine. Seems a little bit of a weird change, honestly. But anyways, those are all the changes for the mages. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Check me out on Twitch, ttv/Aeghis, and peace out.